All right. 3, 2, 1. Hey there, guys. What is going on? And welcome to episode 38 of the Evidence-Based Excellence podcast with your host and friendly neighborhood far-right thug, Mr. George Cresswell. Why, how are you doing? Guys, hope you are all doing well. This is straight off the back of recording episode 36 of all of them, because believe it or not, episode 36 was recorded, then deleted, and then re-recorded at the time after number 37 was recorded. So the episode of 36, which will be going out, will be actually created after episode 37. And episode 38 is now being created directly after episode 36. Anyway, that's really weird. I don't know why I'm going into all of that. But today, it's not going to be a massive scientific breakdown of a study or anything like that. It's just more of a little bit of a philosophical episode, I suppose. Ideas that I got from a podcast I was listening to a few years ago. And there's those things, sometimes you listen to them and it just makes you fire up the notes app on your phone and you realize you need to make a note of this. It might be an audiobook that you're listening to. It might be something that you read. It might be a podcast that you're listening to. You know, for some people, it's like, song lyrics that stick out in their mind and all stuff like that. Regardless of what it is, this was one of those things. And I'm not sure where it initially comes from. I'm not sure who coined this sort of set of ideas and spoke about them in the way that they did. I'm assuming it was from some sort of lecture or some sort of talk on, general well-being and life and stuff like that. I'll have to see if I can find the source of where this sort of came from. But it's called, and I created an Instagram post on it a little while ago, The 4 Things That Make Life Worthwhile. And I thought it was a really nice, interesting set of ideas, and I wanted to talk about them today. And I'll put a link down to the original podcast where I found these from. It's part of a series that somebody created, which is like a sort of like mixture of like motivational quotes and extracts of like, talks that people have gave and interviews and speeches and all the rest of it, with some nice music in the background, something to fire you up for the day. And definitely succeeded in that. The 4 things that make life worthwhile. And I'm going to tell you all of them now so that you can be thinking about them as we go through, a little bit about or as I talk a little bit about them, rather, as we go through. So the 4 things that make life worthwhile. Number 1, life is worthwhile if you learn. Number 2, life is worthwhile if you try. Number 3, life is worthwhile if you share. And number 4, life is worthwhile if you stay. Now, if you've listened to number 36, you might already, I alluded to this idea in that episode. One of them will be immediately sticking out. We'll get to it in a minute. Life is worthwhile if you learn. Now, it'll be hard to find a more true statement than that. Life is a learning journey. If you think about it, you learn all the way from, in some way, shape, or form, from the day that you are born to the day that you cast off the mortal coil and die. So learning is definitely a worthwhile pursuit in life. Now, learning is going to look different for everybody. I'd argue that there's some, fundamental fields that we should all be making endeavors to learn into in some way and venture into, expand our sphere of knowledge in fields, so to speak. I think nutrition is a very good field for people to have a good grasp on. Training also, you don't need to have an exercise science degree or have a major in human physiology and all stuff like that. Just a basic knowledge of things like macronutrients and micronutrients and how to accurately track your energy intake, how to accurately estimate energy expenditure. What is a healthy body fat range and what is a healthy daily activity. What METs mean, metabolic equivalents, what they mean, and all the rest of it. Little things like that I think will really, really be helpful. How much protein you need, why you need that much protein, all the bits which we talked about in the protein episode on different sources of protein and why some sources may be better than others or anything like that. Then, personal development and any other things surrounding that. So, business skills, necessarily finance skills as well. And I know they are big weakness areas of mine personally. They're things that I've had to navigate and learn a little bit about, or learn more than I have with others. Things like nutrition and training have come quite naturally to me through my experience and study. But other things like that, skills to do with that are going to help with business, have been slow to come by. And I've very much so felt like a small fish in a big pond, but also very much so out of my depth at times. Ironic for a lifeguard, I know. But yeah, so that those would be very, very good skills, Also, history, I think, is a very, very important one, because that's going to be very, very important for seeing what we're dealing with now. A lot of people are very, very historically ignorant, and they think they know a lot more than they actually do. And as a result, they think they have a good grasp on what's going on in our societies nowadays and the threat that we face. And that's why a lot of people just don't see it. A lot of people just don't see the mortal danger that we're in right now as a society and as a country. And a lot of that is because they don't have, a lot of that is because they don't have a good knowledge of history, because I think to a certain extent it was deliberately mistaught. And there's a reason why we were being taught about the evils of socialism in the 20th century, for example, and that it is truly an empire of terror. And that's what's going on right now in many areas of the UK. It is all being facilitated by the political class, by the rulers at the top. Keir Starmer is just going to be the one that sends it into overdrive. He's just being the one that sends it into overdrive. They all work for part of the same globalist club, which is the World Economic Forum. That's who they're all beholden to. So we're in very big danger right now. But unless you understand how many people died as a result of socialism in the 20th century and why they died and how they died, and that it was just governments systematically killing their citizens by the order of the hundreds of millions, and that you could just be one of those statistics, you really need to start learning about that. You really need to start learning a bit about things like that. And it doesn't have to be through books and stuff like that either, though they are by far one of the best tools looking at it, and not necessarily like history textbooks, but you can get a lot of these concepts through fiction and stuff like that, even, for example. Obviously, non-fiction titles are great as well, like the Gulag Archipelago, Alexander Solzhenitsyn, but even other, titles that provoke thought and get you to think about things in a different way, which would be books like The Brothers Karamazov. I haven't yet finished that one, but it's very, very thought-provoking, to say the least. One I'm eager to get onto as well is Crime and Punishment. And yeah, I think that's why you can get a lot of the concepts. 1984 is obviously a massive one. So yeah, you can get a lot of the concepts across very well through fiction, and that's what a lot of these authors have done. Literally, George Orwell wrote 1984 knowing it could very well become a reality, and he saw that that's the way society was going in his day. That was back in the late 40s, early 50s. He saw that it was going that way back then, even before Enoch Powell gave his Rivers of Blood speech, for example. And look at the society we're in today. We are in Ingsoc right now. So it's quite funny that Zara Sultana, the MP for whatever constituency she is, I think it's Gaza. I think that's her constituency. But it's funny, she said that people kept seeing that there is no other option, there is no alternative, and she said there is rather. It's called socialism. And then the cat's out of the bag. The cat is out of the bag. Is that they just want to turn us into a purely authoritarian state right out of the USSR, and that's the way it's going to go. It's going to become another globalist entity, and all to our massive detriments. I can promise you that. But learning is still a pursuit that makes life worthwhile. Learning from your own experiences, even. So not just learning from other people's experiences, learning from your own, going back and dissecting, gym sessions didn't go very well, performances that didn't go very well, and seeing what you can do to improve for the next time around, because then you'll have things to implement in your practices that can make things better, and that makes those practices a little bit more worthwhile, and that makes your life a little bit more worthwhile. Also, learning is an absolutely massive one that is, it's hard to be depressed and not want to continue the enterprise of life when you are continually learning, and you make that a focus, and you attack this with an open mind. The minute you close off your mind, you limit your potential. The minute you close off your mind, you limit your potential. So juxtaposing that, you need to not have such an open mind that your brain falls out, but you need to be able to question things. And ultimately, that's what learning is. It's questioning things. And learning leads very well into the second reason as to what to do with the stuff that you've learned. And that is you try. Now, I know that the classic line from Star Wars is do or do not. There is no try, but you have to do things with what you learn. Okay, this is where in fields of science, for example, you have basic science or in laboratory science. I think the term is called basic science. From what I can remember, I think it's basic versus applied, right? You have basic, which is like in a lab looking at cell cultures and all stuff like that. But then you have applied science, and that's where you take it out into other fields and you practice applying it and see if it actually applies out in the field. So it's all well and good knowing the information. So you may have insight into how a mechanism works, particularly in the body. You may see that a specific gene activates this receptor that corresponds to this function. Okay, perfect. You see that in the basic things, but then how does that apply out in the field? And then that's when you need to go out and you need to try it and test it further. Well, the same thing is true with things that you learn. Regardless of what you learn, you have to practice applying it. Whether it's you read a self-development book or somebody's biography, and often when people like, celebrities, whoever it may be, they'll try to input like life lessons into their biographies as if they're some sort of guru. Regardless of who it may be, there may be lessons in there or experiences in there that you read about, and you try things differently the next time you do things based on that. Well, you have to try, okay? You have to, for example, maybe take the risk to start that venture, to start that business, to start that podcast, to start putting your name out there, to battle yourself in that way. You have to do something with the information. So it's otherwise, unless you do anything with it, the dream, the vision, it completely dies. Information without something to carry it forward is completely powerless and useless. You cannot affect change just with information. There needs to be a vector for it. It's a bit like the bacteria. I know this is a bit of a weird example, but the bacteria that's carried by mosquitoes, for example, and the disgusting, diseases that are carried by mosquitoes and stuff, well, they can't do any damage to humans unless they have something to transport it to the humans and to, essentially inject it in, but to be the vector, and that's why they get the nickname vectors, disease vectors, transmission vectors. But without something to carry the information, think about it, that's all the disease is in a way. It is just, information, damaging information to our cells, basically. That's all it is. But without something to carry it, it dies, essentially. So it can't infect the new host. It can't take over the new host. So yeah, it just completely dies. So unless you take what you learn, whether it be from this podcast, whether it be from whatever it may be, unless you take what you learn and apply it, you're not going to get everything that you could get out of it. And that may be, for example, in like your social circle, you read something, for example, and you have, I don't know, a group of friends or a group of peers that you like to bounce ideas off of. And it might be an idea that, even potentially that goes against the grain a little bit. But sometimes you need to put it out there to see how people react to it. You need to be willing to take that step and take that risk in a way, because it is a risk, especially with the more and more people thinking and getting into the frame of mind that it's okay to, brand people as enemies of the state and terrorists and dox them and make their life a living hell, put their lives in danger, direct danger, simply for what they say. We're in a country right now that allows convicted pedophiles to walk free, and just be put under different names in a new community. But people who say hurty words on social media and not very nice anti-government rhetoric on social media get 2 to 3 years in prison. Okay, they're literally bringing out buses, or they're literally bringing out prisons full of murderers and rapists back onto our streets so they can put in protesters. That's the state of the UK right now. Okay, and this is exact same way it's gone in every other socialist utopia throughout the 20th century. But even then, going back to the topic at hand, you need to try. You need to be willing to try. And that carries risk. A lot of people don't do it. A lot of people, they say they're going to do something, but, they don't take the risk. You have to be willing to take that risk. Okay, you have to be willing to try if that's what you're going to do. If you've decided that this is what you're going to do, this is what you want to do, you have to go for it. You can always change course. But you have to pick a course and go with it for a while in order to change it. Now, this is one that's getting a lot of focus nowadays, with good reason, good and bad. I think there's two sides to this coin when you're looking at, for example, the fuss people make about mental health nowadays. I think a lot of it is sometimes very overblown. I think sometimes it's not necessarily overblown in that, people are doing bad by it, but sometimes I think they're focusing on the wrong areas and not necessarily knowing how to go about it. Hope this is giving you some insight into how to go about it, by the way. Hope these episodes are proving useful if you are listening to them and watching them. But number 3 is share. Okay, we're all on this journey. We're all on this journey called life. And it's nice to share. It's nice to share in the experience, share what you've learned by trying and by reading and by watching with other people so that you can help them up also. There's going to be people in front of you that hopefully will be doing the same for you. There's going to be people behind you that you can hopefully do for them what that person in front is doing for you and helping you up while you help them up. And that's how we all help each other up in the end of the day. All help each other along our journeys, not kneecapping each other so that nobody can be successful. We're lifting each other up as we go. That's what we're doing. And that comes from sharing. Comes from sharing your life experiences. Comes from sharing your struggles, you share a struggle with somebody, they might have insight into a solution to that problem that you may never have ever thought of. And it might take you a long time to come across the solution through your reading and through your studying, whereas you could have got it like that just from sharing it with somebody that you know, somebody that you trust. And it could be somebody that is a licensed professional and stuff like that. Obviously, you might need that if you're in a particularly bad place, and I advise you to do that if you are in that bad of a place. Obviously, if you're in that bad of a place, please seek professional help immediately and confide in your friends and family. Please. The world is a better place for you being in it, as we will discuss in a minute. Life's always worthwhile if you share. The more people, sharing their stories and sharing their stories with the goal of lifting people up, of either highlighting something that's important, and getting the truth out, and stuff like that, and sharing what they've learned, so that we can all make each other better in that way. But like what we do, me and somebody else, we do at the minute with jiu-jitsu. It's, we share instructionals and we talk about instructionals and the things that we learn through instructional content. So instructionals, for example, if you don't know, are tutorial videos, say on a particular position in jiu-jitsu, maybe on a particular, attack or something. But it's a series of videos that's made talking you through the different techniques that are being used and the little intricacies and what to do if your opponent has this defensive reaction or this, how to negate this, and, or how to escape this position, and, what to do if you're in the standing and they're in a seated guard or something like that. There's many. Jiu-jitsu is, horrendously complicated, and I'm only a blue belt, so I can't really necessarily speak to it too much. But, it might be a whole instructional that's 8 hours long, for example, looking at escaping different pin scenarios. So pin is when you are on your back and your opponent has gotten past your legs and they're pinning you to the floor, pinning your shoulders to the floor, typically with their chest on top of your chest in some way. So that's a pin, right? It can be across the side, which is what a side control. It can be directly on top, which is the mount. Believe it or not, a pin as well is when you take the back of your opponent and you will actually be on the bottom position technically in that scenario, but because you've got passive legs and you're in the dominant attacking position with your chest to their back, you are still technically in the pinning position, especially if you're in the rear mount where they are face down and you are on top of them. It's an absolutely horrible position to be in. If you've seen MMA and they just rain down strikes against their opponent that's face down in the mat, and it's a horrible position to be in. Absolutely horrible position to be in. But there might be an 8-hour instructional looking at different ways to escape different variations of these positions and how to get yourself back on the offensive. And, we'll share the things that we learn, and different people will share different things. We practice them, we drill them, and as a result, we all lift each other up that way. That all comes from sharing. That all comes from sharing the instructional content, and that all comes from sharing how we are learning it and making sure that it holds us accountable as well then to keep learning. To learn, to try, to share, and potentially, most importantly, to stay. To stay. Quote for this one is, you got to stay until the game is finished. Or stay until the game is finished. Now, in a game called life, that's when you get called. Don't make that call yourself. Don't make that call yourself. It's not for you to make that call. It's not for you to make the call when this life, this physical endeavor ends for you. You keep pushing through it, my friend. No matter how dark it is, you need to keep pushing forward. You need to stick around. People want you to stick around. There's somebody that wants you to stick around. Somebody that may need you to stick around for as long as possible. Make no mistake, I almost lost my life. It's not a place where you want to. It's not a place where you want to be. Not a place where you want to be. But the thing is, unless you stick around, unless you stay until the game is finished, nothing else we've talked about today in the last 23 minutes, 24 minutes, none of it matters. You don't stay around to see long enough, or you don't stay around long enough to see the goal that you set yourself to realized. If you don't stick around long enough to, well, whether it be a long-term, a medium-term, or a short-term goal, you've got to stick around long enough to see it realized if you want then that payoff from the learning, the trying, and the sharing. If you just get a week or two or whatever it may be into it and just decide that's it, you're not going to do it anymore, well, of course it's not going to be worthwhile. None of what you did is going to be worthwhile because you wouldn't have learned barely anything in that time. You've barely had any chance to try anything. You haven't had a chance to share much because it's 2 weeks of doing something is not a lot of time to learn the stuff to share and to try. Now you look at it like that, it's quite easy to see why you didn't stick around. Because you didn't see the long game. You didn't see the long game. Do you see the long game? Yeah, it tells you a lot when a lot of people are... You've got some people that are training just for their looks, for example. People in the gym are training for their looks, but I've met an equal number of people that just say to me that I want to keep myself healthy so that I can go to the beach with my grandkids. You know what I mean? Keep myself just healthy so I can still enjoy long walks and hikes with my wife or with my husband, you know? So that I can still be the fun dad, you know, with my young kids. I want to be strong so I can be a fun dad and be a role model in that way. Now, when you start delving into those things, those deeper motivations, far beyond just you want to do something because you want to do it, or you want to do something because you think it'll feel good, or, you know, there's, I don't know, some clothing you want to fit into, or there's a cover of a magazine you want to be on. And once you start thinking very deeply into it, that's when you can start appreciating the value of what you're doing. And that makes it a lot easier to stay. You know? But you need to stay. In order for the other three to work, in order for the other three to push you forward, you need to stick around. You need to not leave before the game is finished. Okay? Someone will decide when the game is finished, but that's not you. That's not you, my friend. You're here to stick around. You're here to stick around and to improve everyone else along with yourself. So, a little bit of a recap. Life is worthwhile if you learn. Always learning. Every little time you have, the YouTube videos you watch, the things you read, things you listen to, always geared towards learning so that you have things to try. And that's when you get that personal experience, okay? You've had the vicarious experience from what you've listened to, what you've watched, what you've read, etc. You are now moving that into personal experience where you're trying it for yourself, trial and error, improving yourself along the way and making things better along the way, troubleshooting your systems so that you can make something of what you've learned and literally make something out of it. Then you share that with others so that you may benefit them. You never know, you might get people to join you. You might get people to join you as your employees if you're running a business, for example. If you use what you learned to try and run, and you've opened up a little bit of a business and you've got a bit of a business going, well, that's going to attract people. That's going to attract people because there's job opportunities there, and that presents them with personal and financial incentives and development. Maybe you'll be able to take some of them on and develop new leaders for the future, for example. This is what I'm trying to do, particularly with people that are enrolled on some of my programs, for example, and some of my, gym well, gym programs basically. I got a series of them on my personal training software, designed to take people from, newbie, completed at a newbie to confident gym goer over the course of nearly a year. So if that's something you're interested in, obviously leave a comment down below. But none of it matters if you don't stick around. You don't leave when the game is not going your way. We all know how we feel about people, sportsmen, for example, or sports teams that leave in bad sportsmanship fashion before the game is finished. It doesn't go down well. They get slammed for it, and rightfully so. So make sure you stay until the game is finished. I'm one of those people that just decides to quit when it's not going their way. When you're not winning, when you're losing, and you're just having one of those bad times, and it's easy to throw in the towel. At least stay until the game is finished. You don't have to play another game. After that game, you don't have to play another game. But it's always good staying to the end of this one. Always stay to the end of this one. And in the game called life, you may not get another game. I was very lucky that I did. It definitely changes your perspective on everything. So make sure in the game called life, you stay. You stay until it's finished. So I hope you found that episode insightful and useful, guys. Yeah, that is it from me today. Have a little think about it. Have a little think about how you can apply those to your situations and to your lives. And I will catch you very, very soon. Godspeed.